Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I am your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, you're going to want to smash the subscribe and just smash that notification bell because you're going to want to save this podcast episode. Because if you're a business owner, if you're a podcast host, we're going to teach you today how to think like a bank. My brother Sarry is an author, speaker, podcast host, financial mastermind. He does it all. He's the Swiss Army knife of finances. Sarry, brother, welcome to the show.
Hi, Richard. Thank you so much for having me on, man. I appreciate it. And I'm glad to be on here, speak to you, and to speak to the audience today.
I love it. And I love you. I love your podcast. I've read your book 2 or 3 times now. Truly amazing. But my first question I have to ask is, what is your definition of resiliency?
Good question. So to me, resiliency is the ability to keep going even when you're facing hardship. So I think that a lot of people struggle with this, right? It's that you come across hardship and it's like a roadblock, and then you acknowledge that roadblock or consider it. Resiliency is you keep going beyond that roadblock or that obstacle.
Okay, so now I know a lot of your story, you don't have the basic everyday run-of-the-mill story. So talk to us a little bit about where you come from, where you grew up, and how you became the man that you are today.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I grew up in the Chicagoland area in the suburbs of Chicago. And I today I'm a financial planner, and I have a company called Financial Asset Protection, which is a financial services firm. And we specialize in helping a lot of people become entrepreneurs as well as current entrepreneurs. That's kind of our main focus. We work with a lot of real estate investors as well. But of course, I didn't start this way, right? This journey started, I would say, when I was a senior in high school. I had to take a class called Consumer Economics, and the class was about how to, it was very basic finance. It was how to write a check, what is a mortgage, what is a bank, And I really enjoyed that class. It was my favorite class out of all the classes I took in high school because I felt it was going to be the most relevant growing up, right? And I think that, if I had control over like academic studies and how schools ran their programs, I would emphasize, I would lobby for even more financial courses, right? More financial literacy courses, rather than taking art history or art or things like that. Nothing against those subjects. I just think that we need to know more about finance. We need to know more about credit, about money, about, buying assets, buying cash flowing assets, passive income, retiring early. Those are all extremely important subjects that are really only available to the top 1%. The top 1% know exactly how to do that. The banks, the large corporations, they know exactly how to do that. But everybody else doesn't. Everybody else has to work, has to have, a mediocre 401k or a mutual fund or something kind of just to save some money. So I wanted to expand beyond that senior level high school course, and go deeper into the subject of personal finance and helping people break these financial barriers that most people, including myself, have. So I went to college, got my bachelor's degree. Then after that, got my MBA. And the reason why I got my MBA was just to kind of break deeper into the financial business world. I didn't know what that title was called or what kind of profession would involve helping people with their money, helping people get to their financial place. So I thought an MBA would do that. And it did about 10% of that, but the other 90% came from real world experience dealing with people. I worked a lot in the insurance field, where my first professional job was working at Allstate Insurance. And I loved working there. I loved dealing with people, working with people, and helping people solve their financial problems. And I became more of this financial coach for people, the strategist. And that's kind of that was my calling. That I felt like that was exactly what I've always wanted to do, was help people solve financial problems, listen carefully to what they wanted to accomplish, and then find the recommendations and then test those recommendations to see if they're actually working for clients. And that's exactly what we do today. So I know it was a long answer, but my passion comes from helping people, reach those financial goals, more than just the products in the background, the IRAs. More than that, this is more of helping real people solve real problems.
And I love that a lot. Now, I've had Sharon Lechter on. I've had Robert Kiyosaki come on from Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And the reason why I had him come on, because I grew up, my mother was a single mother, And I didn't know anything about business. I didn't know how to write a check. I didn't know what an asset, what a liability was until I picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad and I started playing the cash flow game that they have. But now I'm realizing, like my son, I got two sons, are both in college, are going to college, and they are taking courses in basic stuff, but they're not really taught how to be an entrepreneur. They're taught how to be a model employee. And I think we need, in my personal opinion, we need to be teaching in general courses entrepreneurship, because it used to be where, me and Sarry, we would get a job together and 20 years later, we're going to retire with that gold watch. That's not the way it
Exactly.
is. So I think we need to, start teaching our kids financial literacy. And I think the more you teach kids financial literacy, they're going to realize that entrepreneurship is the way to go. So please give me a breakdown on teaching your kids financial literacy, and then also getting them on the road to entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of good points there, right? I want to kind of take it step by step. So I love how you mentioned Robert Kiyosaki, and obviously in his book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is like the foundation for real estate investing, entrepreneurship. It's like the business 101 book, right? His book Rich Dad Poor Dad. So if you haven't read it, I don't know where you've been, but you have to read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he talks about the benefits of being a business owner, right? The tax benefits, the financial control, the ability to expand your income. And I think that, we need to teach our children this, right? How to be, first of all, what entrepreneurship is. It's when you own your own business, you control your product or service, you have your own client base. That's pretty much in a very basic form what entrepreneurship is. And why is it important? Well, here's the thing, Richard. If I go get a job today, right, making $50,000 a year, I can't make $5 million that year. It's most likely impossible to do that because of the way the job is structured, the way my hours are going to be structured, the way the benefits, the way the whole job is structured. Even if you have a sales job, the brackets of income of how much you can make. And I don't want to generalize and say that, this is how all jobs work, but for the most part, you're capped, right? You're capped at your income. You're capped even with bonuses, even with overtime, even with extra pay. It's only so much that you could do. You can't 20x your income that year. In entrepreneurship, you can. But why is it important? Let's just say you're listening to this and you're like, well, having a lot of money isn't really that important to me. And I get that, right? People have different opinions about money, and that's completely fine. The problem, though, that I think exists is when you have a job and you have an income, and then you start doing your budgeting. You're like, all right, you know what? I can make 50,000 this year. The most I can make is 70,000. Now the lifestyle you live is between 50K a year and 70K a year minus taxes and expenses. And then that becomes your mindset, your mentality. Now you start to have a limited mindset, and this all happens subconsciously. Like you start limiting, like I can't afford that. I should buy something within this range. I should do something within these ranges, and then it starts to shrink your belief system. Your mindset starts to get limited. So when you become an entrepreneur, your mind expands. You start thinking much bigger than your current situation. You start expanding what you could do. Instead of thinking about buying one rental property as an investment, you start thinking, how about I do this 100 times? I have 100 rental properties. Instead of having one business, you start thinking, what if I had 100, like a chain or a franchise? Everything you start doing, you start multiplying it and start thinking much bigger. And then when you have that mentality, you start to have more confidence. Your self-esteem increases, and you believe that you could do a lot more than what your boss tells you or your supervisor or your paycheck tells you to do. So I think that's extremely important. Again, this is more than the money. This is more control over your life, more options for you and your family, and more things to experience in life.
I totally love that. Now, Mr. Jeff Lerner on the other day. He has multiple 8-figure businesses, and he said, who's smarter, for a guy that will try to be an entrepreneur for 12 years and pay $250,000 to learn how to be a businessman, or the person that goes to college gets a degree, say as a doctor, as a lawyer,
Mhm.
and ends up making $90,000 a year. But they're both spending that 250 grand,
Yeah.
both spending the same amount of time, but in the end, the entrepreneur that paid their dues, their financial dues, are 10 times more likely to be a multimillionaire than is the doctor or the lawyer.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is the distinction between traditional education and self-education. So traditional education is bachelor's degree, master's degree, doctorate degree. That's traditional education. I believe in traditional education. I'm for it. There's also self-education, which is far more powerful. Self-education is you're buying books, you're buying courses, your own courses. There's no teacher grading your stuff. You are your own teacher. You are your own university. You're buying your books, you're buying courses, you're hiring mentors, coaches, you're going to workshops, you're going to seminars, webinars, you're paying for those things. That is self-education. That's investing in self-education, investing in personal development. That is far more lucrative than the university degree. Why? Because it's far more applicable to this world. It's the skills you learn are going to be applicable to yourself, to your business, and especially, and a lot of the skills that you're learning in that self-education part is not going to be available in traditional education. So I'll give you an example. A lot of the stuff I learned about personal finance, about managing money, about reaching your financial goals were things that I learned from books and podcasts like this. They weren't from 500 level finance courses and economics and MBA program. That's broad stuff. It's analyzing reports over the last 100 years. It's good to know that stuff, right? But it's not applicable today. It's not going to help you pay your mortgage today. It's not going to help you pay for your groceries today. Self-education will help with that though. So self-education, to your point, is a far greater investment than traditional education. And a lot of people might not believe that, right? A lot of people might believe that, well, that's why would I pay, the same person who tell you that they'll never pay for a course online, a $500 course, is the same person that will go spend $50,000 a year at a university. That's something to consider, is that just because there's a university with a bachelor's degree or master's degree doesn't necessarily mean that's the right decision and that's the overruling decision.
I love that. Now, like I said, I've talked to many 7, 8, 9-figure earners on this show, and a lot of them tell me, they went to school to get their MBAs, and they would talk to the professor. Well, tell me about the business that you started. Well, I've never started a business.
Mm-hmm.
So wait, so you're going to teach me how to start a business, but you have yet to start your own business. So a lot of people that get their MBAs,
Mm-hmm.
when they get out, now they have this big bill. Now they got to pay the dues of learning how to be an entrepreneur from sometimes the beginning. Have you ever noticed stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. There's a big distinction, right? Like somebody teaching you a business course, I would think that the first rule or the first thing you would want to look at is what have they done practically, not theoretically, right? Not how many research papers they've done, not how many articles they've written, not how many, books they've read, but really like what have they practically accomplished? That's who I want to learn from, right? And that's the benefit of mentorship and coaching is you're learning, if it's the right coach, the right mentor for you, you're learning from people who have done exactly what you want to do. It creates social proof for you. It gives you more realistic and more logical things to look for and to replicate, right? To replicate their behavior, their systems, their processes. So that is really important, right? The practical sense of it rather than just the knowledge of something. So what have they done? What have they accomplished? And can you do that same thing? Can you learn from that person? Can you learn the same skills from that person? That's the benefit of entrepreneurship of mentorship and coaching.
All right, so now that's why I want to hit next. As you see, I'm writing stuff down.
Yeah.
Because I actually have a traumatic brain injury, so sometimes I remember things. So if I don't write it down, I won't remember to ask it. But like we talked earlier before we got on, most of my people that are listening are, they're veterans and they're getting out of the military, and they don't have I'm 53. I don't have the time to go get an MBA in business.
Yeah.
So I started a podcast and I'm interviewing 8, 9-figure earners. So I'm actually able to hack and get the knowledge without having to go to school. So I'm actually getting an MBA in business
Yeah.
while interviewing people like yourself.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if there's somebody that's getting out of the military and they don't have time to go back to school for 8, 10 years, what are some hacks start learning, and how can they start learning to think like a bank?
Well, fortunately, right, we're in the year 2022. So as of today, you could probably find more resources than you can handle for free. More ebooks, more regular books, podcasts, videos, courses, 100% for free online, right? If on YouTube, if you Google search these things, there are plenty of websites that have free content. So that's a good thing, right? You could learn a lot of things. The only thing you need is just time and the energy to do the work. So that's what I would recommend. Exhaust as many free resources as you possibly can, like podcasts like this, ebooks, regular books, download, PDFs, check out as much free content as you possibly can. Also, if I encourage you, and this, like this podcast is meant for, look into entrepreneurship, right? Entrepreneurship could be the answer for you of breaking away from the system, breaking away from having to constantly think about where you're going to work and your hours that you have to put in. Think about you controlling what type of work you do, where you work from, how long you're going to work for, how much your money you're going to make. I think that's something to definitely look into. A lot of people think of that as like a distant thought, right? Like that'll never happen, right? They can never see themselves running their own business or having their own, being their own boss. But it's for how doable it is for the person next to you to do it, it's just as doable for you. Anybody could do it. You just have to put in that time, and you have to, and then really importantly, you need to have the guidance. So luckily I have a mentor, right? A really good mentor who's done exactly what I'm doing, but is 10 times ahead of me. So that's something that, I encourage you to do. Not only get a mentor or a coach, but get somebody who's a mentor or coach in something that you're already doing and is far ahead of you. It's like, think about sports, right? And like, I'm really into UFC and MMA. So if you had an MMA fight coming up, right? Like let's just say even a boxing fight or a kickboxing fight, whatever it is, and you were going to hire a coach to help train you for your next fight, you're not going to hire somebody who's on the same level as you to train you. You're going to want to hire somebody who's done at least 10 professional championships, who's won most of those, somebody who's far greater than you at that sport, who's far more advanced than you, physically, mentally, technically, in any way ahead of you. And the same is true in business. You want to work with somebody who's far ahead of you. Whether it's real estate investing or they have their own business or a podcast, they're way ahead of you. As far as income, they probably make 10 times or more of income than you. They have 10 times more assets than you. They have more knowledge. So that's the person you want to work with. You want to work with somebody who's way ahead of you because it gives you more. It gives you more of a challenge to compare to. If you work with somebody who's at the same level as you, new entrepreneur, new podcasting, new to content, new to all these things, the bar is going to be much lower, right? So it's going to be the challenges are not going to be as great as somebody who's far ahead of you. So you want to create those challenges. You want to increase your skills from the people you work with, create more social proof for you to catch up to.
By the way, I'm a big UFC guy, and we are having in the next couple of weeks UFC Hall of Famer coming on the show. The most dangerous man on the planet, Ken Shamrock, will be on. So I just want
awesome.
It's the first time I'm announcing it. So, but since you brought it up, I just figured I'd put it out there. But before we get on talking about your podcast and talking about your book, guys, as you guys know, I love paying it forward. I love helping people. So what happened was I came out with my own coffee. It's called Vertical Momentum Coffee. Twice the caffeine, twice the energy, twice the taste. But the best thing is 100% of the proceeds go to help veterans struggling with PTSD and homelessness. So I make no money off of this, guys. So if you would like to help me out, because everybody loves coffee. So if you love coffee and you love coffee with a mission, please write coffee down below and I'll get you that information out. So I just wanted to say thank you for Jose, for the guy that actually roasted. He's a veteran that actually hand roasts every pound of coffee. He hand roasts it. So I just want to say thank you, Jose. So now the reason why I wanted to have you on, obviously because of how great you are, but when I heard it think like a bank, it took me back to Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
It took me back to that little thing he has, ESB, and it made me start to think, if only people thought like a bank. Like, banks are more interested in owning stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like a lot of people be like, oh, I got a credit card. They're going to buy something on a credit card, paying 22% interest. And then when you put your money in the bank, they give you maybe 0.2, 0.5% interest back. Why
Yeah.
would you even take credit cards or loans out of the bank? So talk to us, break it down Barney style for us, what thinking like a bank actually means.
Well, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. So exactly. You go to a bank and sometimes bank accounts don't even give you, like if it's a checking account, you won't get any interest on that money. So you put your money in a bank account, you get no interest that you're earning on that money. And the bank turns around, right? They take that money that's in your deposit as well as everyone, thousands of other people, and they loan that money out at much higher interest rates, like credit card loans and card notes and personal loans and business loans and lines of credit and all types of forms. And they have an enormous spread. The spread is between 0%, right, that they're giving you for your money, and all the way to 20% interest on credit cards. So they're making a lot of money. In other words, the difference between 0% and 20. And even with savings accounts nowadays, even with interest rates going up, savings accounts are paying like 0.1%, or 0.25%, if that. So there's a big, there's a lot of unfairness, right, in the banking industry. It's heavily favoring the banks. So how do we solve this problem, right? Or how do we take control of this? We do so by us becoming the lenders and us earning a much greater interest rate on our money. So there are ways out there. There are vehicles out there that allow you to earn about 40 times more than a traditional savings account at a bank, and allow you to become your own source of financing. So that way you can borrow from a vehicle in which you control, and you get to keep earning interest on that vehicle. So that way you are not losing interest to banks, nor are you paying interest. So on both, it helps solve both ends of those problems. This is exactly what we focus on. This is exactly what we dive into on our podcast, Thinking Like a Bank. And it's what we talked about in our ebook, which I think you read 2 or 3 times. And I think that's awesome. You read it 2 or 3 times. I don't know anybody else who has read it 2 or 3 times, but thanks for reading it. And that's exactly, that's exactly what the book talks about. It talks about how you can become your own banker, how you can become your own source of financing, how you can amplify your entrepreneurship, how you can take your current business and bring it to the next level using the concepts mentioned in that book.
And one thing, like when I was in the military, they would always say the soldiers were broke, but like the new privates and E2s, E3s, as soon as they get a year in, all of a sudden you're driving a brand new car, you're driving, a brand new truck, paying 25% interest. And then like a lot of Americans, we wonder why we're always broke. I mean, I love Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey's a good dude. I've actually went through Financial Peace University, and a lot of stuff he makes sense. But I'm also a big Grant Cardone guy.
Yeah,
a lot of his stuff makes sense. But a lot of times we're investing in other people's stuff instead of investing in our own stuff. Like for me, I can wear a Nike brand T-shirt. I'd rather wear my shit. I'd rather wear my brand. And I'd rather have people wear my brand. But, I think we need to start, like you said, investing in ourselves as a business than as investing in other people's businesses.
Yeah, I love you mentioned that, right? So I'm kind of in the middle on that. So I think that one should invest in himself and his or herself, build up their business. But I also am, Richard, an advocate of growing other businesses because of passive income. So let's just say, for example, you have your business, right? You've been investing into it. You've been working on it. You've been putting hours and money into this business, and now it's generating a profit. There are some parts of it that can be automated even. And
Yeah.
I think that so one thing that a lot of entrepreneurs would say is keep reinvesting that money into your business. I like that idea. But the problem with that is that for every time you keep reinvesting back into your business, what are you reinvesting back into? More products, more services, more employees, more locations. That's good. But there's a little downside to that. And that little downside is it results in more work for you, right? You're increasing your workload every time you buy more products, more locations, more employees, more training, more software. And again, this isn't to generalize, but I think that it's possible for a small business to reach a point where it's already streamlined, it's already doing well. But now, how can we take those profits and then invest those profits into other businesses that could generate passive income? Now you're making more money without having to put in more time. This is part of thinking like a bank, right? So,
Yeah.
you think like banks when they they're investing into businesses, they're investing through debt, right? So they're giving businesses and individuals loans. This way, it's in a sense, banks are indirect partners of their clients. They're almost like they're getting a piece of everybody's um, profits and their earnings, but they're completely virtual to it. They're not involved in the day-to-day operations. They have no say in day-to-day operations, nor do they want to. There's no liability for the banks except for losing the money they loan to those businesses. So I kind of want to take that process and really replicate it to the small business owner, where how can they make more money without putting in more time or more energy into other businesses?
Okay. So, like I said, I had Mr. Jeff Lerner on,
Mhm.
and just talking about this, and like my brother and friend Russell Brunson talks about. He talks about in his book, the trilogy series,
Yeah.
that the person that can outspend their competitor on advertising will win all the time. And I believe now that, I mean, besides real estate, we all know real estate is king,
Yeah. Yeah.
always has and always will be. But I believe that the future of business and finances is in this little box that I'm talking on right now. And like I was with GNC for over 20 years.
Mhm.
Even if we were open from 9 to 9, once that door closed, sales stopped.
Yeah.
But once you have digital products and are evergreen,
Yes.
the door never closes and it could be seen worldwide. So please talk about the new digital landscape of business in 2022.
Yeah, that's a great observation. That's exactly like, think of a website, right? A website doesn't close. You can visit the website anytime. Think about back to podcasts, right? So podcasts, articles, things like that, digital content. It's almost like you can visit somebody, you could test drive their their product, their service, all online nowadays. And this gives more from the business standpoint, from the owner of that business. It gives them more of um, like more hours to work because you have technology working for you now. You have your website, you have your Google business page, you have your social media pages kind of working in the background, still there while you are sleeping. So yeah, definitely. So in the year 2022, you need to have a lot of a business. You need a website, you need social media pages, you need Google pages, you need email marketing or a newsletter to connect with your audience, regardless of whatever you do, right? Even if your underlying product is non-digital, like you sell physical products, you still need a digital channel, some way to connect with people. Or even a lot of like, for example, if you are a physician, you own your own practice, you need people to come see your clinic, you would still need a digital channel for that. Even though the end result is not going to be digital, you still need a way to connect with people. And if you don't, like you said, if you don't do these things, the in terms of advertising, your competitor will, if they can outspend you, they'll win, in advertising. So if you can't reach your clients or your potential clients first online, somebody else will. And it's kind of been flipped before. So I would say like 20 years ago, it was the opposite. You would first meet with people face to face or over the phone, and then they would connect with you through email. And then as social media came out, they would connect with you on social media, but it was kind of like always first in person or over the phone. And then even I'm not that old, right? But I came from the era of not connecting with people online who you don't know first in person. Think about that for a second. A lot of people had that mentality where they don't email people, they don't communicate with people online unless they met them first face to face, or at least had some sort of conversation with them on the phone. Then they would connect with them via email and social media. Now, is that the case today in 2022? Absolutely not, right? I never met you in person. Yeah, I feel like I've
Not
known you
yet.
for a while.
Not yet. You will.
Not yet. Yeah. But it's the reverse now. People now first want to meet somebody online. They want to check out their social media pages, their LinkedIn pages. They want to see how they are via email, podcast, video, Zoom, and then maybe they might meet later on face to face, even if that person lives in the next town over than you. You know what I mean? So things like that have changed, and especially in the context of businesses, that's also changed dramatically.
All right, so I want to talk about that. I wrote that down, and I also wrote something else down. But now, even if you've been in business for 5 years,
yeah,
the landscape has changed.
Yes.
Like when I was with GNC, we were the top dog. Now we're pretty much about to go out of business, kind of like Radio Shack is.
Yeah.
Sears. And what is it like when you go into a company, even if they're a big company?
Yes.
And they say, like when you start talking about digital marketing, digital advertising, and they say, because I know this is the death knell, well, that's not what we do. This is the way we do it.
Yeah.
So what do you say because I always say, if I hear somebody say that, well, that's the way we've always done it. Where I'm saying, well, you'll be out of business. What do you say when you start talking about all these, digital marketing, evergreen products? What do you say to them when they give you that response?
Okay. So let's say, for example, I'm talking to you, right? So Richard, what's more important for you in your business? What you think about your business or what your customer thinks about your business? That's what I would ask. So in the sense that if you're mentioning digital marketing to a company and they say we don't need digital marketing because we've already built our business through other means and that's how it's always been. The question isn't if they're interested in digital marketing or if they're open to digital marketing. The question is, what do they think about their business versus what the competition or what the customers think about their business? And whoever can address those things and answer those questions wins. It's like Jeff Bezos said, don't worry about your competitors. Don't worry about, what things you've always been doing. Worry about what the customer is thinking, what they want, what they need. Address that. That's how you win in business. And in business is an agile, nimble approach. What that means is that it changes every year. Something changes. The economy changes. People's income changes. People's opinions change. Technology changes. Their laws change. All these different changes affect your product or service. So you must be on top of. You have to be agile. You have to be able to change things. Having done something in the past that's not a legitimate reason to keep doing that over and over again. Why? Because things have changed since the past, especially like look at the difference between 2019 and 2022. That was only 3 years ago. Yet the entire world is completely different. Yeah, of course, COVID had a lot to do with it. COVID was the majority factor for that change. But still, we've had more technology. We've had more social media platforms. We've had more social media engagement. We've had a lot more things have changed. The difference between 2019 and 2022 was probably the difference between the 1900 and then 1960. It was probably that dramatic of a difference, just in 3 years. And I think that moving forward, those differences are going to be just as dramatic. So 1 year from now, 2023 might be completely different. So you need to be on top of those changes and open to learning more. And if you're not, you end up like Radio Shack, right? I think that if I was like the CEO of Radio Shack, I would have been thinking of ways to cut out this whole retail approach and get online, right? And start delivering, free delivery, having social media engagements and removing that whole small retail that worked a long time ago, right? A long time ago, people used to like driving to a small retail store. They liked knowing the salesperson's name, their story, but obviously that's all changed, so you have to change with times or else you'll be out of business.
All right. So now there's something now I was just thinking about. Yeah. Now I'm a 53-year-old guy, but I love video games. I'm a big video game guy. I just got, NBA 2K23. And if I would have told somebody 3 years ago, well, if you're a business owner, why don't you advertise on 2K223? People would be like, oh, nobody's doing that.
Yeah.
Well, or why not start a TikTok channel? Who would have ever thought that Kia,
Yeah.
Gatorade, KFC are sponsoring, are in these video games and in TikTok. Like I'm playing a video game and I don't even drink Gatorade, but I hear it so much. I'm like, you know what? I need to get some Gatorade.
Yeah.
But on TikTok, like companies like KFC, Kia, they're spending 33. Some of them are spending 33% of their budget on TikTok.
Yeah, for sure.
So TikTok's not for kids anymore. But a lot of people say, well, I'm not singing and dancing. Well, neither is Gary Vaynerchuk singing and dancing or Ed Milet. But there's a reason why they're spending a lot of time on TikTok and LinkedIn.
You're so right. Exactly. It's definitely changed, right? It's not so much, you can't just go by the labels of something like how you said TikTok is for kids. That's not necessarily true, right? You have to really look. That's another thing too, is that you have to really look into the data of things and really observe things, because we get caught up in this idea that just because like somebody who's your friend or neighbor or somebody you talk to at the gym or whatever says something, oh yeah, people don't do that whole digital thing anymore, that could resonate in your mind and like you could believe that just because somebody else said that. So it's really important to like dive deeper, and like how you mentioned, like there, what is it, Coca-Cola or spends 33% of their budget on TikTok. That's why do they do that, right? It's because they see that they're going to get the greatest ROI from there. So it's really important to think like a bank, think like a large corporation, right? Where you're following data, you're following trends, because people are doing things differently, as mentioned already. They're doing things differently. So you need to understand what they're doing. So you know how to address those people. You know how to connect with them. You know where they're at, where they're spending their time. So Coca-Cola probably invested that much money because they know that a lot of people are spending a lot of time on TikTok. So it's important to know those things.
All right, so I have another question, and like I said, I wrote it down.
Yeah.
You said something earlier. Now, I lost my vision about 3 years ago. I lost 80% of my vision. So my hearing's gotten so much better. But I hang on everybody's word, and sometimes I'll catch a certain phrase. And you said social proof.
Yes.
And a lot of people, like I have a podcast, as we all know, obviously.
Yeah.
We've had over almost 500,000 downloads. We've had 600 written reviews on iTunes. And it creates social proof. Like when I have somebody like you saying, this was a great show, it was very informative. Or if I get somebody like, David Meltzer, Lerner, or, Kiyosaki, or come on and say, this show is great, you need to listen to it. I could say it a million times, but if you say it, it's the truth. And a lot of people don't realize how important social proof is for a business. Like if you have a website and you don't have any reviews, there's a real problem, because I don't even go out to dinner now if I don't look at for reviews. So talk a little bit about that, about, getting social proof for your business. And most of the time it's free, but sometimes you just have to ask, right?
Precisely. Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So I want to talk a little bit more about social proof. So social proof is where you do something because somebody else did something, right? Because you might have, for example, a brand. This happens a lot in branding, where you go, oh, it's whatever. But then you see 100 people wearing that brand or saying that brand or identifying with that brand. Now it's more appealing to you. And that's not an accident. And that's actually more than just a marketing technique. It's much deeper than that. It's an evolutionary and biological component. So it's actually pretty cool. So the reason why is a lot, thousands of years ago, humans were constantly around a lot of threat, right? From other tribes, from animals, from diseases, from certain things outside external threats. So they had to be parts of tribes and parts of groups, right? So people who were more likely to be attacked or injured or whatever the case might be by animals and outside risks. So over the last thousands of years, we've had this this tribal instinct in our minds embedded into our brains, where we have to be a part of groups and a part of tribes, or else we could be facing harm. So that's taken us all the way to present day, where if we feel that we're outside of a trend or outside of a tribe, we could be facing danger. And companies use this natural trend that we already have, this natural thought, as part of branding and marketing, where everybody else is doing it, you're not doing it, you need to do it now. You're going to incline yourself to do it as part of security and part of protection.
You totally nailed it. Because like even something as simple as like me and my cousins, we all get together every weekend and we're like, hey, what are you watching on Netflix? Well, what are you watching? And all of a sudden we all watching it.
Yeah.
Just because one person started watching it, now the whole group of us is starting to watch it. Now, like I said, I talked to Jeff the other day, and he's friends with the owner of Bombas,
Yeah.
the socks. And I'm seeing now, like I said, I may be wrong, but I don't think Subarus are great looking cars whatsoever. To me, they look like crap.
Yeah.
But everybody I know that owns one won't own anything else.
Yeah.
And I ask them why, and they say it's a great car, it's sturdy, but we love their mission. And I see a lot of people getting behind companies like Bomba, Subaru, that have missions, because they're actually people love to get behind a mission and not just buy just for any reason. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. People want more things than just the value of it. They want mission. They want a purpose, right? A lot of companies, like I forgot there was a shoe company that every time you bought a pair of shoes, they would donate a pair of shoes.
Yeah.
So people want to contribute. People want more than just a product, right? They want to change the world. They want to have an impact in the world and to do things like differently and help. So I like that. I like that business model a lot. I like your business model too, right? You're selling coffee, but those proceeds don't go to you. They go to helping veterans, right?
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think it's wonderful. I think that every business should have some sort of charitable aspect to it, where the customer is not just getting the product or service, they're also getting the charitable parts to it too.
Okay, so now say you were in the military. How old are you now?
I'm 32.
All right, say you're 32 years old. You get out of the military. All you know is the military.
Yeah.
And hearing about this entrepreneurial thing. What are some businesses that you would get with all the knowledge you have now, if you can go back 10, 12 years, what businesses would you get into now?
Okay. So the question was if I can go back in time.
Yep. And if you get out of the military and now you're like, okay, I want to become an entrepreneur, but I don't have any idea what I want to do. I don't know what successful businesses are. Where do you start?
Yeah, I would start with passions. What are you passionate about? What do you believe in? What are your hobbies? What's right in front of you that you're currently doing or currently experiencing? That's what I would start with, Start with what the things you're already buying as a consumer, the things you're already investing into time, energy wise, the things you're using a lot of. I would start there and then figure out a way to, ask yourself, could you make a living out of this? Could you turn this into a profitable endeavor? I also would look at things that you've been a part of in the past, like you've worked in the past, things you might already have experience into that could evolve into other areas. And if you don't have those or you don't want to pursue those areas, then I definitely recommend, learning from others, reading books. Reading books I become kind of like addicted to reading books.
Me too.
Right. So I read, it's very usual for me to read 3 or 4 books at the same time. Why? Because I'll start reading a book and then I'll see the title of another book and I'll start reading that. And then I'm reading 4 books at the same time because I can't wait to finish one before I get to the other. So I would look into books. Books talk a lot about not just the ideas to share with you, but more about the people who came up with those ideas. And then you start thinking, all right, you know what? I can do this idea, or I could do this idea because this other person did this thing. But more importantly, you start thinking of how. So it's like, instead of me teaching you about something, you learn how to teach yourself about something. That's what you kind of get from self-education, which back to that is really important. So you start learning more, not just the what should I do today, what kind of entrepreneurship should I get into today, but more so how do I think. It gets to the point where you can make up a whole business idea, a whole business plan in a week from nothing, from businesses. You start to come up with from those, you start to create methods of creating businesses out of nothing.
And that's something I love. I'm a ninth grade dropout, but I think I've read over 6,000 books.
Oh wow!
Because what I do is every day I take an hour and I have 10 different books that I'm reading, and I read 2 pages out of each book every day. And then when I finish one, I put another one from another author, and I put it in there. But something that I learned from Mr. Russell Brunson, I bought his trilogy, but then I also bought the audio versions. This is a hack for you guys out there that have trouble learning like I do. So I listen to the audible version while I'm reading the book, and it helps me double down on what I'm actually, what I'm actually thinking about and learning. So that might be a great hack for some people that have trouble learning, especially after the age of 50. It doesn't get easier. It gets a little bit harder. So sometimes you got to find little hacks like that. So talk to us about, your foray into podcasting, how that went. What's the name of your podcast? By the way, I don't miss an episode. So if your numbers have gone up lately, it's because of me.
Thanks.
So talk about your book and your podcast.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, so I initially started guest podcasting just like this, where I would go on other shows talking about business, talking about different ideas and things like that. And then I did about 250 podcasts like this in the last 2 years. So between like March 2020 and now, probably around 250 guest appearances. And then in March of 2021, I wanted to make my own podcast so that way I could kind of take a deeper dive into more of the subjects we dive into. And because I need more time, right? We only have usually 30 minutes to an hour on a guest appearance. But when I have my own podcast, I could do 20 episodes on one subject. So that's why I did the podcast. It's a little bit different, right? Sitting in the guest seat versus the host seat. But the podcast is called Thinking Like a Bank. And it's just, it's stuff that we're talking about today in this podcast, right? How to take control of your finances, how to retire earlier, how to earn passive income, how to save an enormous amount of money on taxes, pretty much how to get wealthier without having to pay so much in taxes and without having to do it the conventional, difficult way. That's what we uncover in Thinking Like a Bank. We've brought on accountants, lawyers, bankers, financial advisors, business coaches, a lot of business-oriented, business-minded people to come onto the show and talk about real estate investing and all these other types of strategies. So the podcast has been doing really well. I think we're at this week we'll launch episode 73. It's a weekly podcast. And then we also have the ebook, which you read, Thinking Like a Bank. So it's kind of the brand we're building, the Thinking Like a Bank brand.
Now your podcast, it's on all platforms.
All the platforms, including YouTube. So we upload the version to YouTube as well. And then all the other Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, everywhere else.
Now, are you guys on Instagram and all that stuff?
So we're trying to be. I hired a marketing manager who's going to help me take clips of the podcast and put them onto Instagram and other social media platforms. But I think as of now, we just have a very like a light social media touch. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if you reached out, if you go to thinkinglikeabank.com, you can find the YouTube channel, the podcast, LinkedIn page, my email address, all my contact information and all our contact information for Thinking Like a Bank at thinkinglikeabank.com.
All right. So I just, before we got on, I reached out to you on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So, I have, I think 25,000 connections. They just reached out to me like, you can only get 5,000 more connections. And that's it for you. I was like, wow, I didn't even realize I had a limit how many connections you can have, but how many followers you can get. So talk to us a little bit about, why it's so important to be on a platform like LinkedIn, which I'm a big LinkedIn guy. I'm actually moving more from Facebook over into LinkedIn because I'm starting to see more growth on LinkedIn than I am on Facebook. So
Yeah, LinkedIn is far more business oriented. It's more professional. A lot of people on LinkedIn are building businesses, hiring people. Investors are looking for investors, raising money. It's more serious. It's far more real business. It's like resumes. It's real life business. Whereas social media could be, I mean, other social media like Facebook, Instagram. I don't know. I don't really. That's why I haven't been active on that because I don't think my target audience is on there. I think that they're going to be mostly on LinkedIn, and they're mostly going to be consuming content like podcasts and blogs and things like that. Also think about it this way: like when you connect with somebody on LinkedIn, you get to read their bio, their resume, where they work. So you get to know them better. If you have, other social media channels, you might not necessarily get to know the person that well. So I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I think it's really important. And I think it's really important to build your brand online, right? So you need multiple channels, multiple different ways of connecting with people. So LinkedIn is definitely a great way for that to happen.
all right. So my last question
Yeah.
is, if you wouldn't mind, give us your 3 best tips for building a successful business in 2022.
Yeah, so think much bigger. So whatever you're thinking, expand that, right? Multiply that by 10 times, as far as income, as far as assets, as far as whatever your value that you want to bring to the marketplace, multiply that. Because when you multiply that, you multiply your thinking, you multiply your ambition, and you're also accounting for errors, right? So if I say today that I'm going to invest, I'm going to make $100,000 a year, there's a high chance, even though I might have all the systems in place, I might not reach that. But if I multiply that goal by 10 times to $1 million, I'm almost very likely to get to the original goal. So you want to kind of like create a different outcome, right? Multiply, expand your mind, expand your goals to much higher limits. That's the second thing is get a coach, get a mentor, work with somebody who's far ahead of you in business or whatever it is that you want to accomplish and work with that person. And the third is invest heavily into self-education. Get very comfortable with being intellectually challenging yourself. Again, there's no college professor, there's no boss checking your work, there's nobody checking your work except for you. So get very comfortable with that. Take detailed notes, type those notes, create Google documents, go back to those, create checklists for yourself, hold yourself accountable, make a list. All right, I'm going to read these books, I'm going to take notes on these books, I'm going to then type the notes into this document. Like, give yourself a lot of mental homework. It helps you become more resilient. It helps you remember more details. It helps you do more things when you could transition your physical, transition more into intellectual. When you strengthen your intellectual mind, you tend to make more money and you tend to do more things from one place.
That's you knocked it out of the park. So guys, make sure when you get a chance, as soon as you log off, make sure you get his ebook. It's very easy to it's very digestible, very easy to read, even for a low-tech redneck like me. It's very easy for me to learn. And also make sure you check out his podcast. I mean, I think is one of the best podcasts out there.
Thank you.
I just finished listening to one. I don't remember the guy's name, but he was an attorney talking about business, and I learned a lot just by listening to that episode. So guys, make sure you check out his podcast. Brother, I just want to say thank you, and I'm so truly grateful and honored to be able to hang out with you today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
All right, guys. So remember, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit that button. If you guys love coffee, check us out. Also, like my T-shirt says, today I decide. Those are the 3 most important words in the English language. Today, you can either be broke, busted, or disgusted, or you can be rich. It's your choice. Make the choice. So I love you guys. And remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is but up. Sorry, I'm so grateful. I can't wait to see what you got coming up next.
Thanks for having me on.
Have an amazing week, brother.
You too. Thank you.